This week, I had to trust in God. I was faced with a decision. Do I come here or do I go to wrestling? God said, you have to make a choice. You love wrestling so much that you'll leave the ministry I've given you. See, so many people have changed because of FCA. When I see families being restored, when I see lives changing, how could I leave this for something lesser? When you see something greater, you drop it for something lesser. Today I want to introduce you a guy. I call him one of my favorite pastors. Spencer and Daniel are my favorite pastors. But Daniel's a special guy. He has an amazing story. And he's going to end our series here, Story Time. Can you say story time? Story time. Story time. So he's going to end our series, Story Time. You can't find a more passionate preacher than Daniel Ethridge. There's no one more talented than Daniel Ethridge. He's just amazing. I don't know, I can't describe it, but that's up to God. All right, welcome Daniel Ethridge for your message.
Thanks, Victor. I could never live up to anything he just said, so yeah, thanks for that. That was awesome. Victor, thankful for you, proud of you. I want to get a chance just for the next few moments to share with you a little bit of my story. Anybody a twin in the room? Anybody a twin? Are y'all for real? I grew up a twin. My twin looks nothing like me. He has dark brown hair, small frame, but he's a little bit taller than me. I said it was an even trade when we were born. He got all the looks. He got all the brains, I got all the looks. You know what I'm saying? I'm just kidding. You have to meet him to decide that for yourself. I grew up as a pastor's kid. Any pastor's kids? I grew up as a pastor's kid. Let me tell you, growing up, I grew up in Arkansas. You got to get a passport to get there. It's in the middle of the country. They don't speak English. They speak country there in Arkansas. And I grew up in Arkansas on acreage. Y'all don't know what that is here. That's where they got lots of land and they got cows and pigs and horses and stuff. And yeah, Arkansas, one fan of Arkansas. I loved growing up in Arkansas, small town Arkansas. My dad was a pastor. And I grew up knowing a lot of things about God. Anybody grow up in church? Your grandma, your grandpa, your dad, your mom took you to church. A lot of us in the room. I thought that would be the case today. I grew up going to church. 9 months before the doors were open, I was there every single day. I mean, every day. As soon as I get off school, there was a lady who would pick us up. She'd drive us up to the church, and we'd hang out at the church until Dad was ready to go home. So literally, I was at the church every single day. And I grew up around the things of God. I saw something so genuine in my parents, something so real in them. I wanted that. I just didn't know exactly what it was or how to get it. I grew up thinking I was a pretty good kid. In fact, thinking I was a real good kid. I mean, I was at church every time the door was open. I tried to be respectful. I grew up in Awanas. Anybody know what Awanas is? In Cubbies, RAs, GA, those are all kinds of programs that our church had. And I grew up in the midst of all of them. And I thought, I'm a pretty good kid. I mean, I go to church. I keep all the rules. My parents seem pretty happy with me. I don't act too ratchet most of the time. And when I do, he just takes off his belt and whacks me on the rear end. So we had a pretty good deal going. And age of 11, I got to middle school. I went to public school. Yeah, public school. I went to public school. And 11 years old, much like y'all. Anybody 11 in the room? Oh, wait, is this middle and high? Just high. Just high school. Just y'all are grown. Y'all are grown people in here. So I was 11 years old, entering middle school, and honestly, I started looking at my friends at school, and they seemed a lot happier than I was. But they didn't follow the rules. They didn't do what was right. And I thought, well, I kind of want what they got. But at the same time, my dad was still a pastor. Y'all heard Spencer's story last week. Who's here for that? Spencer and I are best friends, roommates. We do ministry together now. But we honestly couldn't have more opposite stories in so many ways. I want you to realize something. I was just as lost as Spencer was. Even though I wasn't running the streets doing drugs or anything like that. I was just as lost as he was. I was just religious. A few weeks ago, I was in the Middle East, and we were traveling, sharing the gospel with Muslims in closed countries in the Middle East. And what I realized over there is that they're just as bound as in religion as most of us are here in the United States. It's just a different religion. See, I had church and I had rules, I just didn't have Jesus. So I got into middle school, 11 years old, and I said, well, church doesn't really make me that happy, and I don't really like it. My parents just put a lot of rules on me, so I'm going to start trying to go a different direction. And that lasted for a few years pretty successfully. And December, I'll never forget it. It was a week before Christmas, December. We were just about to get out of school. We were having our final, I guess kind of like final test or whatever before we were getting out of school. My dad picked me up on a Wednesday night. We jumped in the car. He pulled out of the school, just like a road like this. He pulled out and he pulled immediately over on the side of the road. He said, hey guys, I don't have time to explain it to you. I was with my twin brother. I don't have time to explain it to you. Your mom has an inoperable brain tumor. Today we went to the doctor. She had a few tests. They've given her about 6 months to live. And he said, I got to tell the church tonight. It was a Wednesday night. I got to tell the church tonight, and so I had to tell you first. Everything's going to be okay. God's faithful. He prayed over us in the car, and he drove to church. And in one moment, my whole world changed real drastically. You would think a moment like that would make me turn to the Lord, but it didn't. It just made me more terrified of the future. And in the midst of my mom going through surgeries and being real sick, I honestly just started running my own direction. I went the opposite direction, not closer to God, not closer into my parents or into my family. I was just like, anything that could numb all this and get me away from this, that's what I want. I was sitting in church on a Sunday night. I was sitting in the second row in the second seat, almost where you are, one seat back. And I heard the gospel that night like I had never heard it before. I heard the gospel that night like I hope you're going to hear it today. See, I was a good kid and I had been in church for a long time. But for the very first time in my life, Jesus Christ showed me my sin. Now, he did it through reminding me all the ways that I was trying to fill the voids in my own life. But for the very first time, Jesus showed me that all my religion hadn't done anything. That all my works hadn't done anything. That I was not a good person at my core. That I had run from him so often. And for the first time on a Sunday night rather, second row, second seat in, I heard the gospel. I was a wreck. The whole time I was clenching the seat of my chair, I was like, I don't know what's about to happen, but I feel like I'm about to fall into hell or something. It wasn't good. I mean, I was just a mess. And that night, for the first time, I walked down an aisle and prayed a prayer. Anybody ever had a moment like that where God really touched your heart, you walked an aisle and prayed a prayer?
Amen.
My whole life, I had viewed salvation like this. Now, this is real important. I only got a few more moments. I had viewed salvation like this. I had heard that salvation was a moment when you sit down in a chair. See, faith was when you put your trust in this chair and you demonstrate it by sitting down. So when you really have faith in God, there's this moment, figuratively, where you sit down in a chair and you trust him. And that's how I viewed salvation. What I didn't realize is the most frustrated I've ever been in my life was right after I left that service. I left that service and got home, and I was so mad at God, and this is why. I had prayed a prayer in one moment, and I went home, and all my desires for sin were still there. I was still struggling. I had really, over the last 2-3 years, I had gone into all kind of sexual sin. I still had all those desires, still had all of that. And I got home that night, I remember laying my head down thinking, all that's still inside of me. I still want all that stuff. And so this was my conclusion. You ready for it? Jesus doesn't work for me. Jesus doesn't work for me. Because I got all fired up, I prayed a prayer, I ran down an aisle, I had sat in the chair, and then I got home and still wanted sin. So the only conclusion is Jesus didn't work for me. Here's what I missed. I had never tried Jesus. I had an emotional moment. I had prayed a prayer, but I had never tried Jesus. Now listen to me, students. I promise you I'm going to be minutes longer and I'm done. So I really want you to catch this. This is why I'm here today. Some of you have grown up in church. Some of you have prayed a prayer in the moment. And figuratively, you have sat down in the chair at some point and said, yeah, I believe in Jesus. But you've never truly been changed by him. You've never learned how to walk with him. You really don't know Jesus. And you think you've tried church, but you've never tried a relationship with Jesus. You've gotten emotional maybe at a camp, or at a D-Now, or at a church service. See, all my background's religious. Spencer didn't have a religious background like me. I had grown up in church and been all around it. But I had still never met Jesus. This is what you got to understand. Salvation is not a moment where we walk an aisle and pray a prayer, though it can start there. Salvation isn't a moment where we get emotional and we cry and we snot, though it can start there. Salvation isn't one moment where you go and you pray in an altar or you sit down in a chair. Salvation is a present reality. I am sitting in a chair. See, walking with Jesus is a present reality. It's not about a one-time prayer. It's about a life posture. It's not about a moment where we trust him. It's about day-to-day walking with him. And what I didn't realize when I prayed that night is Jesus had showed me my sin, but now I had to learn how to walk with him. See, all of my flesh and all of my desires are still right here. Can I share a secret with you? I'm a pastor. And I still fight my fleshly desires every day. I woke up this morning and I said, God, if you don't do something with this flesh, if you don't do something with this sin within me, if you don't put to death what's not of you, I'm going to screw up today. God, I can't do this without you. God, I don't need a one-time prayer and a one-time moment. I need you right now today. God, I don't need a message that you gave me last year. I need a message for Tallwood students right now. I don't want what you did in the past. I want what you're doing today. And some of you think that you tried Jesus because you prayed a prayer sometime. And my encouragement to you is salvation can start with a prayer, but it doesn't end there. It's about learning to walk with Jesus every day. And so my question for you is, have you ever learned to walk with Jesus? Have you ever learned to trust in Jesus? Have you ever learned to rely on Jesus? What about this morning? Do you know that you're walking with God because today you've spent time in his word, and today you've spent time in prayer, and today you're walking with him? See, salvation is not about a moment. It's about a continual, everyday walk with Jesus. And I just wonder if there's some students here today who are like, yeah, my grandmama took me to church. Yeah, my dad, my mom. Yeah, somebody took me to church growing up. But I've just never had a moment where Jesus totally changed my life and I began to walk with him. I want to finish out my story. By the grace of God, I don't know what tragedy or circumstance you're walking through, but that 6-month diagnosis wasn't much for God. God, through his miraculous grace and by his hand, and only by him alone, he chose to heal my mom. Thank you. I don't know, she's still alive today. I wish I had time to tell you the miracle that it was. Even the doctor from India, Dr. Krish. And the last time I ever saw Dr. Krish, he was sitting with our family. He said, I don't know who created you. He's not a believer. I don't know who created you, but he's healed your body. Now, there's a miracle story in there that I wish I had 2 hours to tell you about, all the medical details that were just, God proved himself. But see, my problem wasn't just my circumstances. I don't care what your home life is like. I don't care what you've been through, what sickness or illness is taking hold of you and your life or your family right